counterbalance package against their decks that are susceptible to it. What's really nice about that also is that a lot of the disruption she's going to play against 1-mana cards, things like Thoughtseize, Flusterstorm.
Yep.
Not that counterbalance is the best against all those cards, but still another weapon to protect her against a lot of the hate cards people bring in.
Having said all that, it is not particularly useful here.
Yes. Now, David Yambay playing Death and Taxes. That's a mono-white disruption deck. A lot of creatures with disruptive elements like Phyrexian Revoker, like Thalia, with a mana denial element with Wasteland Rashad Port.
Yeah. And feeling going to lead off with a Ponder. Caught a flash that Sensei's Divining Top in hand, but this is not a Miracles deck. It is not absolutely imperative to get the top in play on turn 1 like it is in that deck. So it's just going to be cantripping on turn 1. And no Mother of Runes, no Aether Vial, no 1-drop of note for David Yambay.
So High Tide is one of many blue combo decks in the format. The upside of playing this deck is that you do not care about Wasteland, and you are very resilient to disruption for the most part because you have a lot of redundancy in your cantrips and search effects. The downside is it's one of the less explosive decks in the format. Its absolute best hands can kill on the 3rd turn, but turn 4 is much more common.
Right, and when you lose that extra turn's worth of explosiveness, you expose yourself to some cards that are maybe too slow to beat the faster Storm decks, like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Definitely David's best tool in game 1 here.
So Feline does have a little bit of action going. She has the top, and she managed to get a Candelabra in play, which, given enough time, will add kind of an explosive burst of mana, which will let her power through that Thalia. Goes for some Ponders and does find the 3rd land drop. That's really the business that Feline is in these first couple of turns, just setting up your hand, making your land drops.
Yeah. And for those of you not really that familiar with Legacy or High Tide specifically, you're going to see a lot of turns of kind of do nothing, play land drops and cantrip, and then fireworks.
And then one big turn, capital OMB. Mother of Rune's going to come down for David. If David gets to untap that Mother of Runes in play, Thalia's not going anywhere. And looks like Feline going to spin the top on David's end step. David did pass with Caracas and Rishon Port open, so likely going to be using that port to tap down one of Feline's islands in her upkeep. Oh, apparently not. So Feline just with the land drop and pass. And that is a 2nd Caracas there for David Yambay, so there goes the 1st. I think that was just kind of a hiccup.
Yeah.
So gonna crash. Just attacking with both creatures, not just Thalia to leave the Mother of Runes back to protect it. So kind of feeling the pressure to get a clock going rather than leave back the ultimate layer of protection for your Thalia.
Yeah, it's the tightrope of trying to apply enough pressure here, but also the concern of opening yourself up to something happening to Thalia. Now, Feline game 1 has no cards that can punish this, but she does have Cunning Wish, which allows her to access things like Snap out of the sideboard to break out of troublesome cards like Thalia.
And Stoneforge Mystic going to fetch up Umezawa's Jite. That will speed up the clock a little bit. It is going to take another turn to actually get into play and get equipped, but then it starts dealing damage in much bigger chunks than David is currently working with.
One of the nice parts about playing a deck like High Tide is you play against the card Stoneforge Mystic a lot in a Legacy event, and you do not care very much about that.
You really don't. Post-board, you may, sometimes Stoneforge Mystic players have access to things like Sword of Fire and Ice, which is just going to find them more disruption. It's still not great. It's just too slow, generally.
Yeah. And this is a pretty bad sign for David here. Feline electing not to do anything with that Polluted Delta. Could sacrifice it to shuffle, get a fresh look with Divining Top, is opting not to, implying she's pretty happy with the card she's seeing.
But just draws and passes, it looks like. So, setting up for a big turn. And it looks like I saw a Swords of Plowshares. So, kind of one of the advantages that the High Tide decks have is they face a lot of irrelevant cards in game 1s. But David's just going to play his 4th land, cast and equip Umezawa's Jite, and go crashing in for 3 and 2 charge counters.
And this is a spot where Feline, for example, can Cunning Wish for Snap can pay the extra tax from Thalia.
And just going to fetch at David's end step. That may be exactly what the plan is. Cutting Wish would cost 4 here because of Thalia, but conveniently, that's exactly how much she has. So, yep, tapping 4, Cutting Wish. And we'll take a look at the sideboard here. You mentioned Snap. She also has access to a Capsize and a Wipe Away. A lot of varied bounce options in the sideboard.
Yeah, for different spots.
Yeah.
Capsize can be a win condition onto its own in certain spots, and also allows this deck to go infinite. Once you generate enough mana where you can Capsize with buy back your own Candelabra, you can just go completely infinite and then Capsize everything your opponent has in certain spots. The Wipe Away, the Snap is the most efficient thing at dealing with creatures, and Wipe Away is just a good catch-all.
Sure. Outside of those 3 bounce spells, she also has access to a Blue Sun Zenith and a Brain Freeze as win conditions, and then a Turnabout and an Intuition, which it's possible that she would be going for one of those 2 if she needs that to kind of complete the combo pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned Snap, and I think Snap is probably the most likely option here in the face of Thalia. She's going to go with Wipe Away.
Now, I think the reason maybe to get Wipe Away here is because David could fizzle the Snap by activating Jitte on the Thalia.
Okay.
Now, Wipe Away does allow... The problem with Wipe Away in this spot that I have is David goes untap, first order of business in my own upkeep, try to give Thalia protection from blue. You're forced to Wipe Away straight away, and then David can untap and just cast the Thalia again in his main phase.
That's fair.
But if David doesn't protect Thalia preemptively, then Feline gets to Wipe Away the Thalia, which is much better for Feline's following turn.
True. Now, Wipe Away, is the one that, of course, David can't activate Mother of Runes in response to. So.
Yeah. But David, with priority in his upkeep, that could have just been the first thing that he did and forced Feline's hand.
It looks like David's gone ahead and drawn the card, and he is moving the Jitte around, kind of trying to mitigate the effect of that bounce spell on David's clock. I'd be more worried about Feline's clock at this point, I think.
Yeah.
But gonna move the Jitte over to the Stoneforge Mystic, crack in with everyone, and it looks like we're using at least 1 charge counter, maybe holding off. Okay, yeah, leaving 1 counter on and pumping up for +2/+2 there. So getting in for 6 damage total.
So given that David has done no preemptive protection of Thalia, this is working out very well for him.
And we'll see what the follow-up is. Just gonna go digging. Plays Horizon Canopy, sacrifices to draw a card, finds an Aether Vial, which will not help him here.
And Feline cannot wait. I mean, she knows that she's got this rolled up at this point.
We haven't really seen her hand as far as the density of action spells, so we don't know if she has everything she needs to properly go off from here. But as you mentioned, there's not really any risk of terrible things happening in terms of interaction from David. She's gonna start off with a Preordain, and did not appear to be enthusiastic about what she found.
I think she is, because the first order of business that this deck wants to do when it's going off is cast the card High Tide.
Okay.
So if she let off with a cantrip instead of High Tide, it means that she didn't have a High Tide to begin with.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, did find the High Tide. I guess that was like it looked like a hands up exasperation, but I think it was like a hands up celebrating High Tide showing up. But yeah, you're right. Finds High Tide off that Preordain, cast it, taps all of her lands, and then untaps them all with Candelabra. And finds another Candelabra. And
away we go.
Away we go. Time Spiral with, I'm not positive how much mana we have floating there. We had 8, so down to 7 off the first Candelabra, and then I'm estimating here, but I believe we have roughly 6 blue mana in the pool.
Plus, now the islands are all untapped, and they both tap for 2 mana at this point. Time Spiral on the screen.
So yeah, so with that mana in the pool, and then that's 10 mana just from the islands. The Candelabra could untap them, so another 15 there, just kind of waiting.
So this is the engine card here that Feline's in the process of resolving. Time Spiral, part of the Urza block, untap your lands cycle, which turned out to be a bit of a development issue with things like Tolarian Academy and High Tide and so forth.
A little bit of a problem.
Sometimes with Time Twister, it's not that powerful because your opponent gets to untap and use the cards first. So R&D alleviated that by adding untap all of your lands to this. And so here we go.
How much do you think this effect should cost? If is there a cost? Like, does it just get more powerful if you make it cost 12?
Potential. I mean, there is a cost where it's palatable, where it's much harder to do, but it's usually best just to err on the side of not doing these things.
Yeah, I think that's the sensible response. Second High Tide, second Candelabra, mana no longer an issue in the slightest, and we're going to Merchant Scroll to go digging for a Cunning Wish. Cunning Wish, as I mentioned earlier, can fetch Blue Sun Zenith or Brain Freeze.
I believe Feline's also in a position now where she can go get Capsize and generate infinite mana that way by repeatedly bouncing her Candelabra. Then can do some real Harlem Globetrotter action by capsizing all David's permanents, then going about business. But it looks like just going for the Green Sun Zenith kill, or Blue Sun Zenith kill rather, which is draw a bunch of cards and then from there shovel back in and eventually do the same to David, but for much more.
Yeah. This first one is going to target Feline. Not sure for quite how much. One of those virtually infinite amounts, I think.
Yeah.
Where it didn't really matter. And we see her just sorting her hand face up here. Going through the process quickly. The Blue Sun Zenith is back in the library somewhere, and we are going to cantrip until we find it again.
Now, normally we do not put High Tide on camera because it is very complicated and slow to go off. The reason that Feline is an exception to this rule is because she's incredibly efficient playing the deck, as you can see.
Yeah, fantastic to watch in action. The whole playing face-up thing, that's something that a lot of people are very uncomfortable doing. But Feline, I think, is pretty good at recognizing when it doesn't really matter because the opponent is unlikely to be able to interact in any meaningful way.
Yeah. She can pretty clearly suspect that Mana Tithe is not a card in David's hand, for example, and she can kind of go about her business.
Sure. Now, she did actually, she cast a Time Spiral as part of this process, so she did give David a fresh 7. But pre-war, there's not really anything to worry about.
Probably just a bunch of Swords to Plowshares and Burmasses and so forth.
Send them to the farm all you want. So, fourth Candelabra coming down. Each of these islands now tapping for 4 blue mana. And I believe if there's a turnabout being used here to untap all of these artifacts. So that resets all the Candelabras. I'm trying to crunch the numbers real quick to see exactly.
Don't
how
even
much
bother.
That adds. All right, I believe that's plus 60.
Yeah.
And activating all the Sensei stops, go digging.
This is sort of the tough part about playing against Time Spiral is that there's always the 0.0001% chance they don't actually win the game. It's not like sneak attack for Grizzlebrand or Emrakul or whatever. So you're going to have to sit here and hope that disaster strikes somehow.
and we see Feline just ponder, nope, preordain, nope, preordain, nope. And there's a Merchant Scroll that is going to find the Blue Sun Zenith. So that will do it. Boom. And one presumes that is a Blue Sun Zenith for enough. As you said earlier, don't even bother trying to figure it out.
He could be playing Battle of Wits right now, and he would still draw his whole deck.
That's probably true. Well, and the thing is, even if we're playing a 300 card deck, she can actually just do it for 100 and then rebuy it with a Time Spiral.
Also, keep in mind that she could also just generate infinite mana here by Cunning Wishing for Capsize. So
a lot of different ways that could have played out there, the stretch, but David Yambay drawing his entire deck. Card advantage is good, but too much card advantage can be bad for you.
Yeah, too much good stuff.
Exactly. Feline Longmore, we're going to go up a game.
Pick up your Mother Runes and your Stoneforge, Mystic Sir. This is not that kind of game.
Feline Longmore's sideboard, I actually already listed off pretty much everything that was in it. It is 4 counterbalances and a bunch of Cunning Wish targets. So I don't actually expect her to sideboard anything. The counterbalances are not good here. The rest of these one-ofs, that's a Blue Sun Zenith with a Brain Freeze, Turnabout, Intuition, Wipe Away, Capsize, Snap, Rebuild, Flusterstorm, Pact of Negation, and Surgical Extraction. Those will stay in the sideboard where they belong, I think.
Yeah, not a lot to bring in. On the other side, David does have some tools to bring in here. 2 copies of Enlightened Tutor. with Spirit of the Labyrinth, Banishing Light, Oblivion Ring, Eidolon of Rhetoric, Aethersworn Canonist, Meekstone, Rest in Peace, Grafdigger's Cage, Manriki Zasari, Ratchet Bomb, Pithy Needle, and 2 copies of Cataclysm in the sideboard. So a fair bit to bring in here. The Spirit of the Labyrinth is excellent. Feline cannot go off in the face of that card. So that's the best tool here by a fair bit. The Aethersworn Canonist, another card that Feline basically has to get off the table or counter before she can do very much of anything. I think it's reasonable for the Needle to come in, as she has shown both Candelabra of Tanos and Sensei's Divining Top. 2 copies of Cataclysm, too. I mean, you know, even though it's not as good as, say, something like Armageddon would be in this matchup, I still think it's probably positive for David to bring in. Feline needs basically 3 lands in play before she can go off.
Yeah, definitely.
So pushing her down to 1 mana with, say, you know, let's say a Spirit of Labyrinth in play, that's a game-winning recipe right there.
Yeah, it's a little narrow. You don't always just cruise to 4 lands, you know, like land drops on turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you kind of do have to cast it on turn 4 for it to be fast enough. But, yeah, I think that you definitely want, you want it more than you want things like Swords to Plowshares. David has a lot of dead or dead-ish cards to replace.
He has 4 copies of Swords to Plowshares. He has a Fiend Hunter. And, you know, Stoneforge Basic probably stays in the deck, but it's not very efficient here.
Yeah. He has a lot of random beaters, I guess. You know, cards that are good cards, but that just don't actually interact with Feline in any significant way. So there's always a balance you have to strike. Like, how much do you keep your Brimazes, for example? They're slow, but they actually attack. You can't just win with a bunch of 1/2s.
Yeah, I think Brimaz is probably good enough to stay in. It is a substantial clock. There's probably other cards in here that are worse served. Flicker Wisp, for example, not a lot of synergies going on in the matchup, so that may be the easiest one.
True. But yeah, David actually has access to a really varied selection of hate bears here. You know, you mentioned the Spirit of the Labyrinth. There's one on the board that's actually to go with the, I believe he had one in his main deck as well. No, never mind.
Yeah, 0 copies, just 1 in the sideboard.
Okay. So 1 of those in the sideboard. 3 different one-of hate bears here. I love this. 1 Spirit of the Labyrinth, 1 Aethersworn Canonist, and 1 Eidolon of Rhetoric. So gets around things like Echoing Truth. We know that's not a factor here, but Feline, this list doesn't really have a convenient way to get rid of multiple hate bears.
Yeah.
So really just upping the density of them is pretty significant here. Yeah, if David makes a turn 2 play like Thalia, like Spirit of the Night, or sorry, Spirit of the Labyrinth, turn 2 Spirit of the Night would be pretty good too, but that's not
A
what we're
little
dealing
slow
with
for the matchup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty bad against Snap.
Yeah. Yeah. Then Feline has to bounce any of those hate bears before she can actually enact her primary game plan. And if David goes turn 2 hate bear of any kind into turn 3 a different hate bear of any kind, you know, each additional layer is an extra turn that Feline has to spend. And it looks like we are off. Turn 1 Mother of Runes for David. Mother of Runes kind of a hate bear in her own right because she, again, provides that extra layer. You've got to get through the Mother of Runes before you can bounce the card that actually matters.
Yeah.
And Feline fetching up an island. No doubt going to fire off one of the many cantrips. Or not, actually.
I think that this just has to do with her wanting to get sacrifice the fetch land now because of Aven Mind Sensor in David's list.
Okay, that's fair.
Just err on the side of sacking your fetch lands right away. There are going to be spots where she wants to hold it, you know, for a shuffle effect, but by and large, I like playing it as soon as possible.
Yep. She's going to stick that Candelabra. David's going to go for the Thalia, and Feline says no. That is a Force of Will pitching, I believe, preordained?
Yeah.
So not getting to use your cantrips is always disappointing, but Feline is going to go for a Brainstorm, max value Brainstorm with that fetch land on turn 2.
And her hand got a lot better too. I mean, it was a little land heavy without a lot of action, but now she has found High Tide and a cantrip. I mean, the hand's good enough now that she's looking at shuffling away a Ponder.
Yeah, Brainstorm will do that.
Yeah.
It's funny how Brainstorm will change the texture of a hand very quickly.
I mean, I play pretty honest decks, by and large. If I had to choose between being Brainstorm guy or being Mother Runes guy, I would be Brainstorm guy. Just kind of as a rule.
I've been Brainstorm guy and Mother of Runes guy. That was Ooh, this is a powerful preordain.
This has the potential to be one of the turn 3 kills
Yeah.
that this deck can generate, which is something like High Tide, use the mana to untap Candelabra, or tap Candelabra, untap your lands. That's enough mana to go.
Yep, we have the mana here. The question is, does David have a way to put the brakes on that? And I did catch a glimpse of there she is. Thalia Guardian for Raven, number 2 coming down. David attacks with his Mother of Runes, so the shields are down. If she can bounce the Thalia, we won't have this problem. But I don't think we'll be able to do that in time against those Mother of Runes. Feline going to tap out for Immersion Scroll. It costs 3 thanks to the Thalia. And can go and find, well, she can go and find Cunning Wish to search for a bounce spell. The question is, did she board in a bounce spell?
Well, the tough part about getting the Cunning Wish here is that David has a Rashad important play. So he can go untap, attack you, port you. You can't Cunning Wish in the upkeep because of the Thalia attacks.
Yep.
And in the meantime, you're taking these shots. So Feline getting wipe away here, and we'll see. I mean, this could be the same setup here where David has an opportunity to preemptively protect Thalia.
Yeah.
And then the question is, does he do it?
So, doesn't need to do it this turn because, of course, Feline is tapped out.
Correct.
And looks like we found Flicker Wisp. So, can add to the clock a little bit there. Just going to jam with those Mother of Runes. And the Thalia, of course. Mizawa's Jite coming down. That's, yeah, cost an extra. Yeah, we need to, yeah, and then we'll pause that game real quickly. There we go. All right. So this is something that when I was playing Death and Taxes, I tripped up on this a lot because you just don't think in that mode because you don't have that many spells that it actually matters for. But Thalia does affect both players. So Umezawa's Jite's cost 3, Aether Vials cost 2, etc. And it looks like we are getting things sorted out.
Very dangerous of here for David to add something like Umezawa's Jite to the board here in lieu of, say, even just porting.
I agree. I don't see the value in this Jite here, but he's gonna jam it. So again, shields are down completely, other than that Thalia, of course. So see if Feline can capitalize. That 4th land drop is huge.
Now we'll see. I mean, this is a spot where, again, David could preempt this wipe away here by first order of business, Mother Runes on Thalia.
But draws the card. So in the main phase, at least, could actually just a main phase Mother Runes activation preempts the wipe away to some degree as well.
Yeah.
And there we go. And now Feline put to the choice.
And this is my concern about going and getting wipe away in this spot.
My question is, could Feline have actually gone off, paying 2 mana for High Tide using Candelabra at that point?
It's tough. I mean, if you go back to the first game, David elected not to do this play and just got his Thalia wiped away. So
Sure.
If you're working under the assumption that that's going to happen again, then you might as well just let it happen again.
Yeah, okay.
Now this is really rough for Feline because I think she was anticipating David is attacking, doing things.
Yeah. Well, and of course she can still do it. The exact same line, just untap, cast High Tide with 2 of your lands, use the 4 mana from the other 2 lands to untap, and then cast Time Spiral.
Yeah, she may be able to resolve a Time Spiral this turn and try to go off, but I think she was anticipating the same setup as last game, and now things have gotten complicated.
Mm-hmm. So, gonna just go off with Thalia in play, or at least in the beginning. Cast High Tide with 2 mana, taps 3 islands for 6 blue mana, activates Candelabra to untap them all again, and goes for a wipe away.
All right, so this still works just fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much mana we have in the pool. I guess just the 1.
So I guess the order that the thing that David actually needed to do was preemptively Mother Runes the Thalia like last time, and then on Feline's turn also
do it again.
do it again.
Yeah. Oh, even that wouldn't have actually mattered. I don't think, because you can just High Tide. High Tide's in, so you can do it in your own
Sure.
upkeep. And so in response to the Mother Rune's activation, High Tide, Candelabra, Wipe Away.
Okay.
Now that you might end up with like mana left over that doesn't quite work out with, of course you can only tap for even amounts of mana once you've cast one High Tide. So you might actually be able to hold off a Time Spiral that way. Time Spiral math's hard.
It's true.
But we are going to go for a Time Spiral. Fresh 7 for both players. David completely tapped out. No spells in his 75 that could be relevant here. So the coast is clear as far as Feline's concerned. Second Candelabra going to come down. Snap going to show up, bounce one of those tap Mother Runes.
Now that snap was a little bit risky. It doesn't matter too much here because Feline has more than enough mana to work with. But David could have responded by using a Jitte counter on his own Mother Runes to fizzle the snap.
That's true.
And deny her. Now again, I think she would have had enough mana left over by a lot, in fact,
Yep.
2 Time Spiral. But
yeah, I think it's just, you're going to shuffle your hand in anyway.
yeah.
So it's not like you can hold the snap instead. So I think just using the snap to get rid of Mother Runes one way or the other. Like I think Feline is happy if David uses a Jitte counter to kill his own creature.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true at this stage. I mean, I think Feline's it's basically win or bust on this turn. I don't think the 2 mana matters that much in the scheme of things. So, and again, last game, the same scenario happened and David allowed it to resolve, so you might as well run it back.
True.
But it is a bit of a risk.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I think the 2 mana is less likely to matter than if you fizzle passing the turn and giving David 1 Mother Runes rather than 2.
Right.
So a fresh 7 drawn for both players, and Feline gonna keep on digging. Going for a Ponder and then a Merchant Scroll.
I think the Merchant Scroll and now the hand going up, maybe it is soon time for the sweet release of death for David.
Yeah. Feline kind of hovering on that High Tide, but the win condition there going to be Blue Sun Zenith, which is in her main deck. So yeah, Feline we've seen her do this before. She actually does kind of play some shell games with the 1-ofs that would kind of move in and out of the main deck, where they can be fetched directly with Merchant Scroll rather than Cunning Wish. But not quite sure exactly how much mana we have access to, but just like last game, it's gonna be enough.
Yeah. The only hope now is that Feline randomly fizzles out. It's not going to be mana is somehow an issue.
Yeah. And having already actually seen the Blue Sun Zenith in her hand, that's not going to happen either. So, Feline going to cast another High Tide, another Merchant Scroll for the 4th High Tide. These islands all tap for 4 mana now, so 20 mana, activate Candelabra, down to 16, 20 more. Blue Sun with 36 mana in the pool. We're not quite sure exactly how much of that mana was pumped into Blue Sun Zenith, but plenty.
This has got to be fun. When you get to this stage,
Yeah, definitely.
I've never played this deck, but this seems like a blast.
Sure. I mean, I've comboed off, with Modern Storm. I play that deck quite a bit, and yeah, getting to proper play Solitaire with a fairly complex engine it's fun. It's fun for somebody.
Yeah. It's all you can really ask for.
Yeah. I believe it was my predecessor, Glenn Jones, who introduced me to this concept. At the beginning of a game of Magic, both players have an equal share of the fun.
Right.
And the object of the game for you is to take all of your opponent's fun.
Yeah, it's 0 sum.
Yes. By the end of the game, you should have 100% of the fun.
Well, now with the other Mother Runes back in David's hand, and David sort of just kind of hanging out with some dice over there, I think that Feline is approaching over 99% of the fun.
Yeah, it's hard to say. She's in the 90s at least.
Yeah.
And it looks like we have retrieved that Blue Sun Zenith. So let's find out if...
I just don't understand if you're Feline in the spot how you turn down the opportunity to capsize and buy back all of David's permanents. I get it. It's not necessary. But
there are some cultures where that kind of showboatery is frowned upon, all right?
You might as well spin the basketball on your finger, while you're here a little bit.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know if the Star City Games Omen series is one of those cultures.
Sure.
I think it is. All right. So 1 card in the library. Blue Sun Zenith, yourself.
Do 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 do.
She might be going for it. Yeah. I don't know. This is starting to smell like some capsized tomfoolery.
Oh yeah,
here.
it's why not? You know, you only live once.
So sorting out her hand, which in this case is basically her entire deck. Casts the 6th High Tide of the game. Plays top. Activates to draw Blue Sun Zenith. Ah, no fun.
Having a little bit of fun
yeah,
here.
Fine. All right. 99 of the funds for sure. Oh, here we go.
Oh no, I think she might be.
Here we go. Just getting a bunch of mana. Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah. So turnabout can untap all the candelabras. That's
And a rebuild.
I don't know. Roughly 200 mana.
Listen,
Who's counting?
if Mother of Rune's guy is gonna sit here taking it, you might as well. You might as well, you know.
Sure. Well, as long as that Aether Vial is on 0, then
Yeah,
you never know. David might be sneaking some kobolds into play.
sure.
Just he can't be trusted. You got to bounce him, right?
Yeah. I like it. I like the rebuild here.
Okay. Yeah, get out of there.
Yeah.
See, she knows.
Yeah, good. All right.
All right. All of the defenses are down. So, yeah, I think this actually is becoming an exercise in how big of a Blue Sun Zenith can we cast.
Yeah. And David there, keeping track of men in the pool, has had to break out the 3rd die as we are now in the hundreds. 297. All right, we're probably going over 400 at this point. And there is a Zenith for 247.
Yeah, not bad.
That'll do it.
All right.
And still pretty efficiently played at the end of the day. I mean, that did not take as long as one would assume.
Yeah, that was a reasonable match of Magic that took place in the span of time in which a reasonable match of Magic normally occurs.
All right, so Feline Longmore now 5-1. I think X1 has to be the record for this tournament. We barely missed 9 rounds, so
yeah,
it's going to be a competitive. It's going to be a tough 8-round tournament.
I will be surprised if anyone gets to draw.